There's a new gang in West Texas with roots linking them to the Midwest, and for whatever reason, it appears they may be causing trouble now in Midland.
No, it's the Milwaukee Kings that they come from Chicago, and they already got 6 of them in jail.
Do you think there's more out there on the street?
Oh yeah, there's about at least 13, 14 more, maybe even more.
Milwaukee Kings is the name of a gang that began in Chicago years ago. Previously,
the indictments today allege the Milwaukee Kings, a criminal organization that intimidated rival gang members, victims, and witnesses through acts and threats of violence.
You turn D every time the Puerto Rican parade. We stay going down Washington, home. When I catch you, I'm at you. You know what it is.
The Milwaukee Kings originated in Chicago's Wicker Park at the end of 1969, founded by Leureano, Shakey Ramos, according to gang historians and local lore. The gang's formation was an act of defiance. Ramos and his relatives boldly took on the name Kings, directly challenging the dominant Latin kings, and adopted the orange and black color scheme used by the Warlords, another powerful neighborhood crew. That decision immediately escalated tensions. The Milwaukee Kings were soon at war with both groups, defending their turf around Milwaukee Avenue and Wolcott Street in Chicago's West Town. By the late 70s, the Milwaukee Kings had developed their own identity, complete with a crown logo and an aggressive, cartoonish king mascot. These symbols became their calling card, tagged on walls, light poles, and corners to mark their presence and dominance.
There's a new gang in West Texas with roots linking them to the Midwest, and for whatever reason, it appears they may be causing trouble now in Midland.
the physical damage done during a drive-by shooting on Clay Street remains tonight, 1 month after the attack, but the fear and mental damage left behind could be far worse. Milwaukee Kings is the name of a gang that began in Chicago years ago, previously having ties to the Latin Kings. Officials working on the investigation, though, tell CBS 7 the Milwaukee Kings are a new gang in town. 3 possible members have been arrested in connection with the shooting. Valenzuela was arrested for allegedly holding up this Midland snow cone stand at gunpoint. The Midland Police Department was unavailable for an interview on the subject today. Sheriff Gary Painter told CBS 7 that he is aware of the gang, but said they're not on his radar and not a big deal.
By the early 1980s, the Milwaukee Kings had become a recognized player in Chicago's evolving gang landscape. Under the leadership of founder Leureano, Shakey Ramos, the Milwaukee Kings formally aligned themselves with the Folk Nation, a prison-born alliance uniting various street gangs for mutual protection and influence. Within that umbrella, the Milwaukee Kings became part of the UPCI Alliance, a tightly knit network that included the Maniac Latin Disciples, Ashland Vikings, Satan Disciples, and Harrison Gents. Together, these gangs formed a powerful Latin folk faction that dominated much of the north and west sides. At the time, the Milwaukee Kings operated largely under the Maniac banner, fighting shoulder to shoulder with the Maniac Latin Disciples in turf wars against the rival Insane Alliance and various People Nation gangs. The Milwaukee Kings weren't just defending territory, they were expanding aggressively, pushing northward along Milwaukee Avenue and carving out new turf from rival factions. Early battles with the Latin Kings and Warlords, who had long accused the Milwaukee Kings of stealing their name and colors, had already hardened the gang into one known for its willingness to brawl for recognition. But unity wouldn't last. Around 1986, the fragile peace within the UPCI Alliance began to crack. A brutal war broke out between the Milwaukee Kings and 2 of their former allies, the Satan Disciples and Harrison Gents. The violence was costly arrests and injuries gutted the Milwaukee Kings leadership ranks. Facing increased pressure from both law enforcement and enemies, many of the Milwaukee Kings abandoned their original strongholds around Wicker Park and West Town. Instead, they moved northwest. That year, 1986, marked a turning point. Milwaukee Kings sets began popping up in Belmont-Cragin, specifically around the Wicker Park area. This neighborhood, far removed from the gang's Wicker Park roots, would become a new epicenter of the Milwaukee Kings' activity and remain so for decades. As other gangs concentrated their power in their traditional strongholds, the Milwaukee Kings were quietly building a new power base farther west. By the early 1990s, expansion efforts were in full swing. In 1993, Shakey Ramos sent trusted members including J-Dog to establish a chapter in Cicero, specifically the Grant Works section around 21st and 51st Court. Recruits included local Hispanic youths, some of whom defected from the Latin Angels, and within months, a tough, tightly knit Cicero Milwaukee Kings crew had formed. Their reputation for violence and loyalty quickly made them notorious on the streets. Meanwhile, Milwaukee Kings' influence spread into other corners of the city, including Logan Square, where Milwaukee Kings graffiti and members were spotted near Schubert and Fairfield, a corridor along Milwaukee Avenue where many of the gang's earliest members had once hung out. In the early 90s, Chicago's gang landscape was fractured by growing tension between the insane and maniac factions, two folk nation subdivisions that had once fought side by side. The Milwaukee Kings found themselves caught in the middle of escalating conflicts that no longer aligned with their interests or loyalties. By 1995, tensions with the maniac Latin disciples, their longtime allies, erupted into open conflict. That year, the Milwaukee Kings made a decisive break. They withdrew from the Maniac Alliance and abandoned their position within the folk nation's street-level coordination boards like La Tabla. From that point forward, the Milwaukee Kings became one of the few prominent Latino gangs in Chicago to ride alone, unaffiliated with any major family or alliance. The Milwaukee Kings maintained informal ties with a few surviving folk allies and occasionally worked with groups like the Latin Jivers or 2-6 on specific blocks. But officially, they stood apart by choice and by necessity. This independence came with consequences. Without the protection and backing of a larger umbrella organization, the Milwaukee Kings would face a growing list of enemies in the years to come, not just People Nation gangs, but also former allies and even law enforcement. Yet for all the setbacks, their story was far from over. Leureano, Shakey Ramos, was more than just the founder of the Milwaukee Kings. He was its mythic figurehead, feared leader, and spiritual anchor for over 3 decades. From the gang's rough beginnings in Wicker Park to its later expansion into Belmont-Cragin and Cicero, Ramos presided over the Milwaukee Kings through eras of brutal street warfare, strategic alliances, and internal evolution. Even from behind prison walls, his influence never faded. What made the Milwaukee Kings unique among Chicago's notorious street gangs was their familial core. Many of the Milwaukee Kings were blood relatives of Shakey himself, giving the crew a tight-knit, almost clan-like identity rarely seen elsewhere in the city's gangland. This deep-rooted loyalty was both their foundation and their code. Betrayal, according to multiple accounts, was met with medieval-level violence. Former members and gang historians tell stories of traitors having their hands severed and mailed to relatives, grim warnings that Shakey's sense of loyalty was absolute and unforgiving. Yet, beneath the brutality was a complex figure. Shakey often described his mission as protecting his neighborhood from external threats, especially the more dominant Latin kings, who had once tried to force his family into joining their ranks. Ramos turned that pressure into resistance. He didn't just start a gang, he built a movement to fight back, rooted in defiance and family honor. "We wanted to defend the whole community," he once said, referring to the early days of the Milwaukee Kings in Wicker Park. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, Shakey remained the guiding force of the gang, helping steer the Milwaukee Kings into broader alliances. According to some accounts, he served on La Tabla, the folk nation's internal street council, alongside high-ranking maniac Latin disciple figure Victor King Vic Gomez. Under Ramos's leadership, the Milwaukee Kings adopted signature iconography, skull-faced kings, jack-o'-lanterns with pitchforks, and other haunting visuals that became synonymous with their street brand. Law enforcement viewed the organization differently. Investigators described the Milwaukee Kings as a full-blown criminal enterprise, heavily involved in narcotics trafficking, weapons sales, and brutal violence used to secure territory and discipline their own. Under Shakey's rule, the gang earned a reputation for being independent, feared, and unshakable, a group that didn't need alliances to survive and rarely sought external validation. But everything changed on March 11, 2002. Shakey Ramos, 48, was due to be released from prison, a symbolic return of the king. Instead, he was found dead just hours before his expected release. Officially, the cause was ruled a possible H overdose, but rumors of assassination spread almost immediately. Some believed enemies or perhaps even former allies didn't want Shakey returning to the streets. The details remain murky, but the impact was clear. The Milwaukee Kings had lost their founder, their icon, and the man who had defined their identity since day one. Shakey's death marked the end of an era. Without him, the Milwaukee Kings would continue, but never with the same cohesion or mystique. For those who followed him both in the streets and behind bars, Shakey wasn't just a gang leader. He was the embodiment of a creed built on loyalty, fearlessness, and protection at all costs. His story is both a chilling reflection of gangland power and a tragic example of how trauma, charisma, and control can shape a generation of young men into soldiers for a cause.
The federal government has indicted 2 men who they say murdered a teenager to increase their position in a Chicago street gang. The indictments came down today against 40-year-old Gary Roberson and 41-year-old Joseph Matos. Roberson is in custody, but Matos is still on the loose with a reward on his head. These are pictures of Matos. Both men accused of 19-year-old Chris Carvajal in July of 2021. The feds say the 2 were trying to maintain and increase their position in the Milwaukee Kings street gang and randomly shot Carvajal.
2 alleged gang members are charged in connection with the murder of Illinois National Guard soldier Chris Carvajal. Gary Gotti Robertson and Joseph Troubles Matos are accused of shooting Carvajal on July 3, 2021. The indictment says the 2 shot him to maintain their position and protect their gang territory. They were charged on federal racketeering charges. At the time of his death, Carvajal was 19 years old and had just...
In June 2024, federal authorities announced another round of indictments, this time charging 2 longtime Milwaukee Kings members, Joseph Troubles Matos and Gary Gotti Robertson, in connection with the deletion of 19-year-old Illinois National Guardsman Chris Carvajal. According to the indictment, on July 4, 2021, Matos and Robertson lured Carvajal from a party in the Belmont-Cragin neighborhood and shot him to death. Prosecutors allege the deletion was a cold-blooded gang hit committed for the purpose of maintaining and increasing their positions within the Milwaukee Kings. Robertson was arrested and pleaded not guilty. Matos, however, remains a fugitive under a federal arrest warrant. In a high-profile operation on May 17, 2024, FBI agents donning tactical gear and deploying flash-bang grenades stormed a home in Lincoln Square during a pre-dawn raid in search of Matos. He was not found, and the raid became a flashpoint in the local news, with photos of heavily armed agents on the front porch making the rounds in Chicago media. These indictments are a chilling reality. Even after the 2002 death of founder Shakey Ramos, the Milwaukee Kings continued to operate as a lethal organization, using deletion as a strategic tool of gang politics. Law enforcement officials have cited these recent cases as clear evidence that Milwaukee Kings, while less visible than during their 1980s peak, remain an active and dangerous presence in Chicago's criminal landscape. Though the old guard of the Milwaukee Kings faded with time, the gang's violent presence on Chicago streets persisted, drawing the attention of federal prosecutors and law enforcement well into the 21st century. By the late 2010s, it was clear that the Milwaukee Kings, though diminished in visibility, were still deeply entangled in drug trafficking, firearms offenses, and deadly gang rivalries. In May 2019, Attorney's Office unsealed a sweeping indictment that brought national focus back onto the Milwaukee Kings. 4 alleged Milwaukee Kings members in May 2019 were charged under federal racketeering statutes with multiple committed in aid of gang activity. prosecutors painted a grim picture. These young members allegedly carried out deletions across Chicago's northwest side to maintain and increase their positions in the gang. One example cited in court filings was the December 16, 2016 demise of 28-year-old Crispin Colas, a rival whom Martinez and Lozoya allegedly executed to earn rank within the Milwaukee Kings. The indictment accused the group of being part of a wider network engaged in distribution and violent enforcement, where brutal tactics were central to asserting dominance. All 4 defendants entered not guilty pleas and faced the possibility of life sentences if convicted. But the crackdown didn't stop there.
Bitch, all y'all King Johnny. Stop bringing the police to my crib, ho. You a bird, I'm a real nigga. I get money. SB killer all day.
Today, their most active block is Marmora and Alkeld, where the legacy of Swift City M-Town Milwaukee Kings still echoes through graffiti, street lore, and turf identity. The death of Leureano Shakey Ramos in 2002 marked a turning point, perhaps the beginning of the end for the Milwaukee Kings as a dominant force in Chicago's gang underworld. As one gang historian succinctly put it, the MKS continued to have a presence at Huron and Noble up to present years, but the majority of their presence left in the 2000s decade after Shakey passed away. Without their founder and symbolic anchor, the gang struggled to maintain its once-feared grip on its historical Wicker Park and Westtown strongholds. By the 2010s, the Milwaukee Kings were no longer visible in the core neighborhoods where they'd first risen to power. Instead, their presence retreated to the city's northwest side, particularly in Belmont-Cragin, where a chapter had been established back in 1986. According to gang mapping data and police intelligence, the MK's territorial footprint condensed into a few blocks around Reese Park, with consistent graffiti and occasional patrols still observed near intersections like Alkeld and Marmora or Belden and Meade. These corners, once hotbeds of gang activity, now serve as quiet reminders of a once expansive gang empire. Today, law enforcement agencies describe the Milwaukee Kings as a significantly diminished group, more of a lingering local crew than a major force in Chicago's gang landscape. The Chicago Police Department and suburban gang units still track Milwaukee Kings activity, but primarily in northwest side beats and select areas of Cicero's Grand Works district. Even there, shootouts, narcotics arrests, and street-level violence involving MK members have sharply declined in recent years. The 2019 and 2024 federal indictments targeting figures like Santa Lozoya and Joseph Troubles Matos further thinned the gang's leadership and operational capacity. And yet, the name Milwaukee Kings refuses to disappear entirely. Their signature graffiti jack-o'-lanterns, crowned skulls, pitchforks can still be spotted sporadically on alley walls and viaducts in neighborhoods like Logan Square, Irving Park, and near Reese Park. Local residents occasionally report that older MK members still hang around block parties or quietly run low-level drug operations on longtime corners. In many cases, they function less like an organized syndicate and more like a loose network of aging affiliates and younger imitators trying to hold on to a legacy. But that legacy is fading. Without a central leader, and with most of the old guard incarcerated, deceased, or disconnected, the Milwaukee Kings of 2025 are a shadow of their former self, a historical remnant of an era marked by bloodshed, loyalty, and the larger gang politics of Chicago's streets. While law enforcement keeps one eye open for signs of resurgence, most now see the MKS as a diminished clique with fading influence, their once feared name now mostly echoing through memory, folklore, and weathered graffiti tags.